Your ADHD brain isn't lazy. It's running a different dopamine playbook. And once you see the mechanics, everything changes like for real. Here's the deal. Dopamine isn't just reward. It's the signal that tells your brain, this matters right now. When that signal's shaky, tasks don't feel motivating until you're already stressed, behind, or late. That's why you can sprint for a fire drill and then stare at a calendar like it's written in another language. Sound familiar? So what do you do with that? You stop trying to force willpower and you start designing a workflow that your dopamine system can tolerate. Especially because with ADHD, waiting for motivation often feels like waiting for a bus that never shows up. That's where the 25-minute protocol comes in. Not the normal Pomodoro you learned in productivity land. This one is built to catch your attention before it bolts. But here's the part nobody talks about. Pomodoro only works if you set it up for atypical brains, timing, friction, and the dopamine dip between starts. And this is where it gets wild. The protocol gets easier the more your brain resists. You with me? If you've ever started strong and then crashed mid-task, which part hits you hardest? Starting, staying focused, or finishing? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. 1. ADHD brain basics. What changes in attention, timing, and reward? ADHD isn't can't focus. It's more like your attention gets pulled by whatever feels most rewarding in the moment. That's why the same task can feel boring and impossible at one time, then suddenly doable when the stakes spike. Sound familiar? Here's what changes under the hood in plain English. Your brain's dopamine signaling tends to be less reliable for routine stuff, so boring work doesn't automatically feel worth it. Andrew Huberman talks about how dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's tied to motivation, learning, and what matters right now. When dopamine doesn't tag the task as urgent enough, you can end up chasing stimulation instead. Notifications, cravings, new ideas, side quests. Timing also gets weird. Your sense of time gets less predictive, so the start feels harder than it should, and minutes can evaporate while you're stuck in neutral. Now, look at reward because this part matters. With ADHD, your brain often needs faster, clearer feedback loops to stay engaged. Walter Mischel's marshmallow work is famous, but the key takeaway you can feel in daily life is this. Waiting is tough when the reward is delayed and the brain can't bridge the gap with confidence and structure. Not because you're lazy, more like your brain struggles to maintain effort when the payoff isn't immediate or visible. The result? You get these swings, hyper-focus when interest hits, then crash and burn when it doesn't. So what can you do with that knowledge today? For your attention, you want to make tasks feel more like a game with immediate cues, visible progress, quick check-ins, and tiny wins that your brain can actually feel. For timing, you want external clocks and short cycles so your brain doesn't have to guess how long is this going to take. For reward, you want to attach something your brain already likes. Movement, music, a snack, a satisfying ritual to the start and to each small finish line. And this is where it gets wild. The classic Pomodoro technique can work for you, but only if you tweak it to match how your dopamine system learns in the moment. But here's the part nobody talks about. How to scaffold Pomodoro so it doesn't trigger your start friction in the first place. Which one are you going to try first? Making progress visible, shrinking the timing guess, or adding immediate payoff to the start? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. 2. The 25-minute protocol. Core structure and why it works. ADHD brains often don't treat interest and urgency the same way your typical brain does. Dopamine's not just about pleasure. It's about motivation, learning signals, and keep-going momentum. When tasks feel flat, your brain struggles to generate that internal push, so you end up chasing novelty or getting pulled into whatever finally hits hard enough to move the needle. Sound familiar? Here's the mechanism in plain English. Your brain needs stronger cues to trigger action, and dopamine systems help decide what feels worth the effort right now. If the cue is too weak, too long, too boring, too vague, your brain stalls, and then time feels like it's slipping through your fingers. The dopamine system also learns from outcomes. So if you keep starting and then crashing, your brain can wire this thing equals stress and friction, which makes the next attempt even harder. That's why willpower gets you through the first minute, then it fades. The 25-minute protocol works because it gives your brain a scaffold, a short, repeatable container where effort is expected, but the commitment stays small. You're not asking for finish the whole thing. You're asking for show up for sprint. And for ADHD, small and structured matters because it reduces the planning load and increases the chance your brain experiences momentum sooner. Cal Newport talks a lot about deep work needing protected focus time. This is basically that idea, but adapted for a dopamine-sensitive attention system. Okay, so what does it look like when you actually do it? You take a classic focus block and make it more friendly to atypical brains. Set a timer for 25 minutes. Then do one job that's clear enough that you can start without a negotiation. No work on project. More like write the intro paragraph, outline 3 bullets, or answer these specific emails. Then you pair it with an activation cue. Right before you start, same desk setup, same website blockers, same playlist, same little breath, so your brain learns the pathway faster. James Clear's whole, make it easy to start, vibe fits here, but you're doing it with a time container and dopamine cues, not just motivation talk. Now the modifications that make it click for ADHD. First, choose a task that has a visible finish line inside the block. Your brain hates invisible progress. If the task is ongoing, you define an output. 1 page, 1 voice memo, 5 problems, a clean next step list, something you can point to when the timer ends. Second, use a difficulty gradient. Start slightly easier than you think you need for the first 5 minutes, then ramp up. It's not coddling. It's giving dopamine time to kick in before you hit the wall. Anders Ericsson's deliberate practice idea is about structured repetition. Here you're structuring repetition of first can start, first can sustain, first can end. Third, you end the block on purpose. During the last few minutes, you do a tiny wrap-up so the next block is instantly startable. Write the next action at the top, collect materials, close tabs, and decide what counts as done for today. That aligns with what we know about implementation intentions. BJ Fogg's behavior design talks about designing triggers and reducing friction, so your next start is less of a fight. Quick rule: if you can't predict what you'll do in the next block, you'll renegotiate with yourself. That negotiation is where ADHD hijacks you. But here's the part nobody talks about. What you do after the 25 minutes decides whether your brain trusts the protocol. If you jump straight into doom scrolling or long social rabbit holes, you can accidentally retrain your dopamine to associate focus break with chaos. So the break should be a quick reset that still respects your nervous system. Stand up, water, light stretch, a short walk, maybe a snack, then you come back. Keep the cycle tight enough that your brain doesn't build dread. Which one are you going to try first? A task with a clear finish line, the easy to hard ramp, or the next action, note at the end? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. 3. Step 1, 0. 5. Reset the brain with context, intent, and low friction. ADHD brains don't just struggle with attention. They struggle with starting and staying on in a way that's tied to dopamine signaling and the brain's reward prediction. That's why motivation can feel like a light switch. It's not that you don't want it. It's that your brain doesn't consistently find the worth it signal soon enough to get the gears moving. Sound familiar? Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine helps your brain tag what's useful and what's worth effort right now. And it also supports learning from feedback. What worked, what felt rewarding, what to repeat. With ADHD, that tagging can lag behind your intentions. So you're standing at the starting line, trying to will the gunshot into happening. Then your attention drifts because your brain looks for whatever input produces a faster reward or relief. The goal of this first phase is to make starting easier than escaping. Okay, so how do you reset your brain in the first 5 minutes? You don't try harder. You give your brain context and intent like a GPS, and you remove friction like it's a shopping cart with no checkout page. Start by writing one sentence for context, where you are and what you're doing. Not a life mission, just the immediate lane. Then add one intense sentence. What counts as success for the next chunk? Keep it small enough that your brain can believe it. For example, instead of work on my report, you'd say, open the document, write 3 bullet points, and label them with headings. That's it. Low friction wins. Now, make the dopamine part work for you, not against you. Use a scaffold that's short enough to beat the task feels big alarm. Pomodoro can be your friend here, but you tweak it for an ADHD brain. Don't rely on the default timer as a test of endurance. Treat it like a dopamine delivery schedule. Start immediately. Expect it to feel weird for a minute and earn a micro reward at the end of the sprint. Pick a starter action that's so tiny it's almost silly. Open the file, create the new page, set out the materials, turn on the exact playlist that signals focus mode. Then you're not negotiating with your brain, you're giving it the cue it understands. Here's a concrete version you can try today. Before you start the timer, do a quick context reset. Clear your desk surface, close unrelated tabs, silence notifications, and put a single tool within reach, like your notes doc or worksheet. Then speak your intent out loud for 10 seconds. First, I'm doing the first step only. Start a short sprint, 5 minutes is plenty. Then stop on purpose, even if you could keep going. This matters. ADHD brains often get stuck in the spiral of first they'll just keep going until first crash. So you train a clean boundary. When the sprint ends, you get a quick reward. Stretch your neck, drink water, one short message, or step outside for a minute. Keep the reward small. The win is the pattern, not the binge. But here's the part nobody talks about. Your context isn't just the environment. It's also the identity your brain is running. If you label the task as punishment, your dopamine system will keep hunting for relief. If you frame it as a game with clear rules, context, intent, and a tiny first rep, your brain can learn the loop faster. That matches what behavioral design folks like BJ Fogg emphasize. Make the desired behavior easier to trigger, and you'll get more starts without needing heroic willpower. ADP for your executive function. Quick activation. Which one are you going to try first? Writing the one-sentence intent, setting a silly, tiny starter action, or adding a micro reward right when the sprint ends? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. For Step 2, 15 focus sprint with activation, targeting, and error-proofing. ADHD brains don't lack discipline so much as they run on a different reward clock. Dopamine is involved in motivation and learning. And when your brain doesn't get enough spark from the task itself, you can feel glued to your phone, your thoughts, or the nearest bright distraction. Sound familiar? Here's the mechanism in plain English. In ADHD, front to striatal control, your start, switch, and stick with its system can be harder to recruit on demand, especially for boring or delayed reward tasks. Your brain still wants the same outcome as everyone else. It's just that the usual ramp-up, interest, urgency, novelty, might not kick in unless you engineer it. That's why try harder fizzles. It asks your brain to do effort without the payoff cue first. So the focus sprint idea is basically a scaffold, not a test. For the sprint window, you're aiming for 5 to 15 minutes of enough momentum to win. Not forever. Not until you feel inspired. You're trying to build a quick, dopamine-friendly start. Then keep the task from firing back with friction. Cal Newport talks about how deep work thrives on protected time blocks. The ADHD tweak is that you're making the block easier to enter, not just harder to interrupt. You're giving your brain a door it can open fast. Targeting is where people get it wrong. Instead of work on the project, you pick a tiny target that has a clear finish line, something you can point to and say, done. If the task is writing, your target might be outline 5 bullet points or write the ugly first draft of 3 sentences. If it's studying, your target is answer 2 practice questions or summarize 1 concept in your own words. Now your brain has a short trip with visible landmarks. That matters because ADHD attention often snaps toward novelty and completion cues. Activation is the turbo button before the sprint. You don't start by staring at the blank screen. You start by priming the task with motion and cues. Open the exact document, place the timer where you'll see it, and do a 1-minute setup burst like gathering the materials and writing the first line prompt. James Clear's habit framework is all about making the first step small. Same vibe here, but for your attention system. You're removing setup friction so your brain doesn't burn dopamine just to begin. Error-proofing is the secret sauce nobody loves talking about. ADHD likes to derail through tiny obstacles. Unclear instructions, missing files, wait, first don't know how to do this, or the classic perfection trap. So you pre-design the sprint, so the most likely derailments already have an answer. Put a cheat sheet next to you. Keep the next action written down. For anything that requires a decision, you lock the decision beforehand. If first gets stuck, first will write what first think, then highlight the confusion and move on. That's consistent with the idea behind deliberate practice from Anders Ericsson. Progress comes from focused reps, not from grinding through chaos with no feedback loop. And if you crash mid-sprint, good. That's data, not failure. Your goal isn't to prevent interruptions forever. It's to prevent the crash from turning into a full-day spiral. So you use a rescue move that takes less than 1 minute. Stand up, drink water, take a breath, then do a micro version of your target. 1 bullet, 1 question, 1 sentence. Walter Mischel's marshmallow test research gets quoted a lot, but the core takeaway you can feel in real life is this. People do better when they can manage delay and attention using strategies, not vibes. Your rescue move is an attention strategy. It keeps the sprint from getting fired into the void. Try this today. Set a timer for 5 to 15 minutes. Pick one finishable target. Do a 1-minute activation setup. Then write your error-proofing rule right next to the task. Something like, when stuck, do the next smallest step. Don't research yet. Which one are you going to try first? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. 5. Step 3. 15. 20 retrieval plus output burst to convert focus into progress. Your ADHD brain isn't just unfocused. It's often tuned for fast dopamine shifts, not steady, boring progress. That matters because focus usually isn't a willpower problem. It's a motivation and reward timing problem. Ever notice how some tasks feel impossible until the moment they suddenly become urgent? That spike is your system looking for a payoff. Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine is part of how your brain tags worth doing and how it helps you sustain effort. With ADHD, that tagging can lag, so effort doesn't feel rewarding long enough to keep you moving. Retrieval, pulling the info out of your head, creates a quick win signal. Output, something visible you produce right after, locks that win into your brain's reward loop. So you're not waiting for motivation to show up. You're generating a reason for your brain to care on purpose. And yeah, Pomodoro can work here, but you've got to tweak it for how your dopamine system actually behaves. So what does a retrieval plus output burst look like in real life? When your timer hits the middle portion of your session, you stop rereading and start yanking. No highlight and hope. You grab a question, a prompt, or even your own messy notes and force retrieval fast. Try this. Read a tiny chunk, then close the page and answer 3 quick bullets from memory. Then immediately do an output burst. Turn those bullets into something you can point to, a 1-paragraph explanation, a rough outline, a practice response, or a sloppy checklist that's still useful. The goal isn't perfection. It's first produce something before your brain gets bored and goes chasing novelty. Now, for ADHD-specific modifications that make this stick, make retrieval short and structured so your brain doesn't spiral. Use cue cards, made from the exact questions you're trying to answer, not generic prompts. If you're writing, retrieval can be, what are the 3 main points? Then output is, write the ugliest first draft of those 3 points. If you're studying, retrieval can be, what would first say to teach this to a friend? Then output is, write the mini lesson in your voice. And if your brain hates starting, reduce output to 1 sentence plus 1 example. That still counts. Dopamine doesn't require a masterpiece. It needs a completed action with a clear finish line. One more key, keep the burst boundary tight. ADHD brains often get stuck when the task is open-ended because there's no natural done signal to harvest. So you set output rules like produce one answer, generate 3 bullets, or finish one diagram. Then you stop when the timer ends, even if you want to keep going. That stopping is weirdly powerful because it trains your brain to associate the session with a closure cue. Cal Newport talks about focus as something you can engineer, not just hope for, and Anders Ericsson's work on deliberate practice backs up the idea that targeted effort beats random grinding when you're trying to improve a skill. You're basically running micro-deliberate practice, retrieve, then output, then adjust. Hold that thought, because the next part is where this gets wild. You can design your burst to match your dopamine trigger, urgency, novelty, competition, or storytelling, so your brain stops fighting you. Which output burst are you going to try first? 1 paragraph writing, 3 bullet recall, or a mini teach back? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. 6. Step 4, 20-25 recovery, review, and next action lock-in. ADHD isn't just can't focus. It's more like your dopamine system keeps getting tugged toward novelty, relief, and movement. So tasks that feel neutral or boring can't hold your brain's attention the way you need them to. Quick reality check. Dopamine isn't only pleasure. It's also the get me from here to there signal, motivation, learning, and the drive to act. Sound familiar? Now here's the mechanism in plain English. With ADHD, you often don't get the same steady internal push for long, low-stimulation stretches. So your brain starts hunting for dopamine elsewhere. Notifications, pacing, quick research spirals, snacks, anything with a spark. That Pomodoro thing people recommend? The classic version assumes your brain can tolerate waiting out momentum. But for atypical brains, waiting quietly can feel like sitting on your hands while your mind runs laps. So step 4, recovery, review, and next action lock-in, basically gives your brain what it needs to keep playing along. Let's talk recovery first. After your focus sprint, you don't just stop and stare at the wall. You downshift on purpose. Stand up, drink water, let your eyes change distance, do a quick walk or stretch. Keep it short enough that you don't evaporate into a new distraction, but long enough that you're not trying to force a crash and burn return. Matthew Walker talks about sleep and the brain's reset cycles. And even though you're not doing a nap, you're still respecting that your brain needs transitions to keep performance from dropping off a cliff. The takeaway you can do today, set a hard end of the work, then do a 3-part reset. Body move, sensory switch, then breath. No scrolling during that window. None. Then comes review. This part matters because ADHD brains can get fuzzy on cause and effect. You need a tiny what happened log, not a life story. Ask yourself 3 quick questions. What triggered traction? What hijacked me? And what would make the next round easier? Cal Newport gets at this with deep work ideas. Focus isn't just willpower, it's environment design and friction control. So your review should name friction. Was it unclear wording? Too many tabs? A task that's too big to start? Or did your brain just crave novelty because the task didn't give you immediate feedback? Notice that when you can name the trigger, you can change the design instead of blaming yourself. Finally, you lock in the next action. This is the do not negotiate move. Your next action has to be so specific it could be carried out by you at your least motivated moment. Not work on the report. More like open the document and write the messy intro outline in 5 bullet points. Or reply with the 1-sentence question first am avoiding. Or research one source and save the link. BJ Fogg's behavior design work is all about matching behavior to capacity, small enough that it's doable, triggered at the right moment with the right setup. Your takeaway today: write your next action before you start thinking about anything else. Put it on the same page as your timer. Make it visible. Make it brain-proof. Here's the part nobody talks about. You can use the pause to steer dopamine on purpose. During recovery, you're not just resting, you're preventing your brain from grabbing random rewards to make up for the effort you just asked it to do. Then during review and lock-in, you're giving your brain a clear path that still feels like a win. That's the dopamine bargain. Effort now, momentum later, no mystery. But here's where it gets wild. Your Pomodoro doesn't need to be a rigid prison. If Classic 25 is too long for your wiring, try shorter sprints that you can actually finish. Then use Step 4 to make each sprint clean and rewarding. If you spike into hyperfocus, you might not need extra structure, but you still benefit from the review and next action lock-in to avoid losing the thread when the intensity fades. The protocol works because it respects how your brain switches states, not because it forces everyone into the same template. Which part are you going to try first? Recovery, the mini review, or the next action lock-in? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. 7. Protocol personalization. Adjust for task type, medication, sleep, and stress. If your brain's attention is chasing novelty, it's not you being lazy. It's your dopamine system running on a different thermostat. ADHD folks often need more immediate reward and clearer cues to kick motivation into gear, and that matters when you're trying to do the same old productivity thing. Sound familiar? Cal Newport talks about how deep focus is built through friction reduction and structure, and that lines up with what a lot of ADHD brains need. Scaffolding that makes starting feel doable. The key is personalization, because one-size methods can turn into a setup for shutdown. Here's the mechanism in plain English. Dopamine helps your brain encode, "This is worth my attention," and it's tightly linked to effort, anticipation, and reinforcement. So when the task feels dull, delayed, or vague, the spark doesn't show up on time. Meanwhile, executive function has to juggle working memory, time blindness, and inhibition, so you might know what to do and still struggle to do it. Pomodoro can help because it creates a predictable loop, short sprint, visible progress, and a planned end to prevent the too big, too long spiral. But the classic version assumes the same energy curve for everyone, and ADHD energy curves are more like a wave. Sometimes you're on, sometimes you're flooded, sometimes you're stuck in syrup. Let's talk task type first, because your break strategy should match what you're doing. For activation, tasks, like starting an email draft, opening a workbook, or cleaning one tiny corner. Use a shorter sprint and a gentler goal. You're not finishing the whole thing, you're only getting momentum. For analysis tasks, reading, outlining, problem solving, keep the sprint longer so your brain gets a chance to settle into pattern recognition. Then end right when comprehension clicks instead of forcing through boredom. For emotion-heavy tasks, calls, conflict, medical paperwork, your personalization is about lowering emotional friction. Try a two-step Pomodoro. First sprint is only preparing materials and writing a rough script. Second sprint is the actual sending or speaking. That prevents your brain from trying to do both the emotional regulation and the execution at the same time. Now, medication and timing. This is where your protocol should stop pretending you're a robot. If you take stimulants, your focus window can be tighter and more bursty. So you want the most demanding work in the hours when you feel activated, not when you feel flat. If you're on non-stimulants, effects can be steadier but slower. So you might need more structure first than go time first, like starting with planning, checklists, or the smallest measurable action. And if you're not sure how your meds affect you, treat it like data. What tasks feel easiest right after dosing, and which ones still feel like dragging a boulder? Adjust your sprint types based on what actually gets done. The goal isn't to push through, it's to route work into the dopamine lane you're currently riding. Sleep and stress are the hidden knobs that change everything, even when your schedule looks the same. Poor sleep doesn't just make you tired, it makes it harder to regulate attention and sustain effort. So your Pomodoro might still work, but your targets need to shrink. Stress does something similar by stealing working memory and increasing distractibility, which can turn a focus session into a mental doom scroll session wearing a productivity costume. What do you do today? Add a stress check at the start of each sprint. If you're at a low point, don't demand deep work. Go for maintenance Pomodoros like organizing tabs, sorting notes, or drafting bullet points you can expand later. If you're wired from stress, do a short reset first, water, quick light movement, and a one-sentence plan for the next action. Then your first sprint becomes get moving, not solve everything. Here's the part nobody talks about. Classic Pomodoro breaks can accidentally reward avoidance in ADHD. If your break is a dopamine free-for-all, social media rabbit holes, high stimulation videos. You train your brain that the way out of discomfort is instant chaos. Instead, personalize breaks to keep the reward loop constructive. Use breaks for reset actions that refresh but don't hijack. Stretch, shower, short walk, tidy one's surface, snack with protein, or a quick breathing drill. Keep the break timer too, because ADHD often treats time like fog. Knowing the exit ramp exists reduces panic and makes returning easier. Cal Newport would call this building an environment where focus is the default, and James Clear would say you're shaping habits through cues and consistency. Same idea, different vibe. Hold that thought, because the next twist is how to tune your Pomodoro when your brain refuses to start even though the timer is ready. Which one are you going to try first? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. Okay, so here's the ending that hit me the hardest. Your ADHD brain isn't lazy. It's wired for novelty and fast rewards. The dopamine system tends to lag when a task feels slow, boring, or unclear. That doesn't mean you can't focus. It means you need a structure that makes focusing feel like it kicks in sooner. Sound familiar? That's why the 25-minute protocol works as a scaffold, not a rule. You're not forcing willpower. You're designing momentum. Smaller start, clearer next step, a short window your brain can tolerate, then a reset that earns relief. Dopamine likes wins, and this gives you wins on purpose. Now, here's the practical takeaway you can do today. No fancy stuff. Set a timer for 25 minutes. Make the goal tiny enough that you can't argue with it. Like, open the document and write 2 sentences tiny. Before you start, remove one friction point you know will slow you down. Phone in another room. 1 tab only. Done. When the timer ends, don't push through. You take the break you scheduled. That break isn't a reward you hope for. It's part of the plan. And if your brain starts going feral during the window, you don't restart the whole process. You switch to a next action version of the task. Same project, but an easier first move. Then you re-enter. And this is where it gets wild. Current ADHD research and clinical guidance keep pointing toward behavioral strategies that change the environment and the task framing, not just the person. So yeah, Pomodoro with modifications isn't about productivity theater. It's about matching your brain's timing and reward needs. Kind of like syncing to a different rhythm. So quick question for you. What's your biggest problem right now? Starting? Staying on? Coming back after a break? Or is it the whole time feels fake thing? Which one are you going to try first? Drop it below. If your brain like this, hit subscribe. More brain hacks every week. Next up, we'll get into how to tailor the timing and reward cues when your ADHD isn't just distracted, it's overloaded.